Welcome back to All This Math. This is Professor Parker, and I want to give a shout out to Lincoln University. The reason I want to give a shout out to Lincoln University, not only because I learned a lot at Lincoln University, I earned a master's degree from Lincoln University back in 2015. One of the reasons I went to Lincoln University is because they bestowed a honorary doctorate to Amilcar Cabral. Amilcar Cabral was a revolutionary leader in West Africa in a group called PAIGC. They were fighting for independence and freedom and their humanity, ultimately, from the Portuguese, right, who had colonized Guinea-Bissau, the country known as Guinea-Bissau, which is in West Africa. It's also connected politically to the Cape Verde Islands. So in 1972, they bestowed an honorary doctorate to the brother Amilcar Cabral, revolutionary leader of PAIGC. He was assassinated in 1973 by the Portuguese, but they still did gain their political independence. So definitely shout out to them. And if he's a brother that you're unfamiliar with, please go do some research. He left writings. There are books that have been written about him. Again, his name is Amilcar Cabral, and he has a connection to Lincoln University, which is in Pennsylvania, which is a historically black college or university in Pennsylvania, because they bestowed him an honorary doctorate degree back in 1972. All right, now let's get into multiplying fractions. Right? We got two fractions here, 4/9 times 3/16. All right, I'm gonna do this two different ways. I'm gonna go straight across horizontally with the numbers, and then I'm gonna do it using what I call the Malcolm X method, right, of cross canceling. The Malcolm X method of cross canceling. I use Malcolm X method for a lot of math that we do. All right, a lot of stuff that we see in math. Now, what does 4/9 mean? 4/9 means that we have an object that's divided up into 9 equal pieces, and we are focused on 4 of those pieces. That's what 4/9 means. All right. And then we have another 3/16. What does that mean? That means we got an object that's divided up into 16 equal pieces. Emphasis on the word equal, not just random pieces, but equal pieces, right? So you see, math is about equality, right? Math can be used to establish equality, right? So we got 16 equal pieces. We are focused on 3 of those pieces. Okay. Now, what does 4/9 times 3/16 means? We could think of this as 4/9 of 3/16. When we get into the word problems, you'll realize that the word of means multiply. The vast majority of the time, the word of means multiply. So 4/9 of 3/16. Let's say you had a cup, right? And like that cup had liquid in it. All right. Well, that container, a container has liquid in it, and that container can be divided up into 16 equal parts. And what's left? 3 of those parts. So 3/16 is left, right? And then somebody comes along and they say, okay, well, I need, they end up taking 4/9 of what's left in the container, right? So we want to know what amount is that compared to the size of the original container, right? Compared to a full original container. What is 4/9 of 3/16? So when we do the multiplication, this is what we're about to figure out. All right. Now, like I said, the first method is just multiplying straight across horizontal. So I got to know my multiplication facts in order to do this. So I know 4 times 3 is 12, right? Now, multiplying fractions is unlike adding and subtracting fractions, whereas when you add and subtract fractions, you need to have a common denominator. You need it, right? You can have a common denominator here, but you don't necessarily need it, right? But in addition and subtraction of fractions, you need a common denominator. You must have it. All right, or else you can't do it, right? But with multiplication, we don't need a common denominator. We can just multiply straight across. Now, 9 times 16, that's a little complex. Most people don't walk around knowing what 9 times 16 is off the top of their head. But what I like to do is a mental math trick, where I take the bigger number, in this case, 16, the 2-digit number, and I break it down into a happy number and the leftover. So the happy number would be 10, right? And the leftover is 6, because 16 is the same thing as saying 10 plus 6. 16 is the same thing as 10 plus 6, right? Because 10 plus 6 equals 16. So if I think about it that way, I could use something called the distributive property. And I could do 9 times each of those numbers. I could do 9, I'm going to say it again because this is important. 9 times each of those numbers. So 9 times 10 is 90. How do I know that? Because I know 9 times 1 is 9. 9 times 10 is just 9 with a 0 attached to it. 90. What's 9 $10 bills? $90. So 9 times 10 is 90. And then I also multiply the 9 by the 6 that was left over. So again, happy number and a leftover. Happy number and a leftover. Happy number, happy, like H-A-P-I, like what our ancestors called the Nile River thousands of years ago, right? In Africa. So we got 9 times 6. You got to know your multiplication facts. That's 54. Now, ask yourself, what is 90 plus 54? 90 plus 54, right? Because we were doing, this is 10 plus 6. So we multiplied 9 by each of those numbers, but they still got to be added together. The products got to be added together. So what's 90 plus 54? Well, I know 90 plus 50 is 140. How do I know that? Because I imagine those zeros wasn't there. I know 9 plus 5 is 15 because I know my addition facts. So I'm giving you all the math tricks, right? 9 plus 5 is 15. So 90 plus 50 is 140, right? So if 90 plus 50 is 140, 54 is the same thing as 50 plus 4. So we got to add that 4 that was left over. What's 140 plus 4? 144. 144. Now, you should always reduce your fractions when you do problems like this, right? Now, I just know that the greatest common factor between 12 and 144 is 12. Because I know that 12 times 1 is 12, and I know 12 times 12 is 144. So 12 is the greatest common factor between those numbers. So the way I reduce the fraction is I divide each of these by 12. So I divide the top by 12. I divide the bottom by 12. As below, so it is above, right? So we got 1, 12. And that's our final answer, right? But that's if I multiply horizontally. Now let's flip it and let's use the Malcolm X method, right? You might like this better. I like it better. So 4 ninths times 3 sixteenths. I write it again and I do something called cross cancel. Cross cancel. So you look at the numbers that are diagonal from each other, right? The 4 and the 16 are diagonal from each other. The 3 and the 9 are diagonal from each other, right? Ask yourself, what's the greatest common factor between the numbers that are diagonal from each other? So the 4 and the 16, greatest common factor is 4. So what do you do with that 4, right? You divide each of those numbers by 4. So I do 4 divided by 4, which is 1. So that turns into a 1. I do 16 divided by 4, which is 4. So that turns into a 4. Now, this diagonal, I got a 3 and a 9, a 3 and a 9, a 3 and a 9. What's the greatest common factor of 3 and 9? Greatest common factor of 3 and 9 is 3. So I divide each of those numbers by 3. So 3 divided by 3 is 1. 9 divided by 3 is 3. Now these are my new numbers. These are my new numerators and my new denominators. So now when I multiply horizontally, my numbers are much smaller. So the work is much more manageable. So that step I had to do when I had to do 9 times 16 and I had to use the happy numbers and the leftovers and all that, I don't got to do all that no more. I just multiply straight across. What's 1 times 1? 1. What's 3 times 4? 12. Notice how I got the same thing. And I call that the Malcolm X method of cross canceling. Cross canceling. Because we went in an X formation. X formation. So even when we do math, we can evoke the ancestors. We could think about Malcolm X. We could talk about Malcolm X. We could go off and have a separate conversation about the OAAU or, Muslim Mosque Incorporated or Malcolm's travels through West Africa near the end of his life. We could talk about any of it. We could talk about his work in Pan-Africanism and trying to, bring Pan-Africanism to the United States. We could talk about any of that. And it's all connected to the math because we use the Malcolm X method. So, but anyway, make sure you know how to multiply fractions. Horizontally is important and also to reduce fractions, right? When you get the answer, if you can reduce it, if they are reducible, and also know how to cross cancel using the Malcolm X method. All right. So go get some practice with those types of problems and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.